Welcome to Season 1 of the Mapleside Chats, your glimpse into the CEIBS MBA. This podcast presents you with the inside scoop on what really happens behind the scenes of China's top business school. Located in Shanghai on Hongfang Road, or Red Maple Road, the China-Europe International Business School aims to develop tomorrow's business leaders with a China depth, global breadth mindset. Sounds intriguing? Let's get started.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason from CEIBS MBA 2023, and I have with me today 3 guest speakers, Andrei, Amanda, and Camilo. In today's episode, we'll be discussing working experience in China. They all have very interesting stories about the lessons learned in China and their advice on how to deal with cultural difference. So let's get started.
Hey, hi everyone.
My name is Andrei. I came from Russia.
I came to China when I just turned 17. I was too young and naive. Actually, I never planned I would stay so long here. For me, apparently, it was about only my undergraduate program in Fudan University. But afterwards, it was longer and longer, and now it's 15 years here in China. My overview was all the time about connections between China and Russia, because Russia import a lot of stuff from China, export some gas and oil to other countries. So till 2014, my overall work was connected with this kind of business, import-export. I do remember I was running a small startup when there's no AliExpress at that time. So the basic idea was you receive money from abroad, you buy something from Taobao, you package it and you send it away. And take a 10% margin from the amount of the order. My undergraduate program, I bought around 2 million USD. After my undergraduate program,
I did not want to join some company
because it's boring and I don't want to listen for someone who will say me what to do, or how to do, etc. But after I failed a few times in entrepreneurship, I understood that I'm too stupid at that moment to
start a business.
So I joined some company in that time. It's Zhejiang province, and I made a switch from export from China to Russia to import from Russia to China at 2014. Ruble go down, and more goods from Russia started to be more attractive than before for Chinese market.
I applied to CEIBS in 2019, but for my family reasons, I should defer it. So I started to study in CEIBS in 2021.
Hi, my name is Amanda Pawlowski, and I've been in Shanghai for 8 years. Actually, I first came to China in 2011. So I visited Shanghai for a summer when I was still in university. I had a good friend who was living in Shanghai, and he had been here for a couple of years. I just really fell in love with the city. It was an excellent summer. I traveled around. I went to Huangshan, and when I went back to university, I was finishing up my last year, and all I thought about was China and how I could move here. But it was about a year or so after I graduated. And yeah, I didn't really have a full plan of how long I would be here. I definitely didn't expect it would be 8 years. I just took a leap and moved to Shanghai when I was in my early 20s.
I had a bit of a similar experience. I was also in China around that time in 2010. And I was in East Asia mostly to see Japan. I was very interested in that country, and I've been studying the language for a few years. And we just decided to make a stopover in Shanghai because Shanghai was holding the World Expo. But at that time, I didn't have a huge interest in China. What's interesting is during my time in Japan, I just thought to myself, I could never really live here. But as soon as I came to Shanghai, I thought I could really see myself living in Shanghai. I just found Shanghai to be so much more open and welcoming and dynamic, especially for foreigners. I think it's a place where you can fit in a lot better and find a more dynamic role for yourself.
It's really interesting that you say that, Camilo, because I've had the exact same thought when I've traveled to Japan. And it's funny because when I've been living in Shanghai, I always envisioned Japan as a place I would love to go next. I've always really had a fascination with the culture as well. But especially at that time, like 2010, 2011, Shanghai was just exhilarating. There was just an energy here that almost anything was possible. It was really dynamic. Everything was changing so fast. Shanghai seemed much more livable, and it seemed like you could really build upon your own interests and find people here that identified with your interests, and you can become involved in something that had a lot of potential here. Prior to moving to Shanghai, I was working for a refugee assistance center. Essentially, we were helping refugees who moved to the US get acclimated and get set up. And one of the main ways that we did that was to help them become self-sufficient in terms of teaching their children English, helping get them access to different resources and different government programs that were there for them. So that initially sparked my interest in education. And I had some connections in Shanghai when I first moved here. And it was a fortuitous circumstance that I met my first boss when I got into education consulting. And at the time, I really loved the job and I really wanted to grow in that career. So it happened organically. We were basically a startup, and I helped students apply to boarding school and also universities, as well with all of the prep that entails. And after that, for the last 4 years, I worked in an international school where I was the director of the middle school and high school.
I come from the field of arts and culture. I actually studied painting and sculpture in school and had been doing it for many years. I've been living in New York for several years, working for an artist, managing his production studio. And I was approached by a management consultant from McKinsey because they were planning some public art projects in the Middle East. And they wanted someone to do feasibility analysis. And that was the first time that I saw that my kind of industry knowledge could be applied to these larger projects that fit into a framework of the cultural development of a city or a country even. And it was through my work with her that I really opened myself up to working in more strategic roles through arts and culture. So the way that I came to China actually is I had been working as an art curator for downtown Dubai with a real estate company called Amar Properties. After my project was done with them, I was looking for a place to work, and I had some leads in Paris where I'd lived before, and I had some leads in Saudi Arabia, and I had some leads back in New York. And out of the blue, a friend from Shenzhen sent me a one-pager from a co-founder at an art consulting startup incubator called Xnode in Shanghai. And she said, "This seems like this is up your alley." I read it, and within an hour, I was on the phone with the guy. And within a week, I was in Shanghai. It was just such an exciting opportunity.
Yes,
And we really got along together. I've been in Shanghai for about 4 years. I've been in several roles. I worked as an art curator. I worked in the production side of art. But most recently, I've been working as an art consultant in a kind of a niche field, specifically public art. I've been in China with a foreign company facilitating public art projects for government and real estate clients.
Can you share one or two interesting stories that happened to you?
You want a funny story?
Yeah, funny story.
I still remember there are a lot of American singer stars who was coming to China. So I remember my first concert for
Beyonce.
She came to Beijing, and I was already at Fudan University, and I need to skip class, so I have to put some notice to professor. Dear professor, I'm from a very small village in Russia, and
Beyonce
for me was the best pop star of all of the world. And now she's coming to Beijing. And for that reason, I would like to skip your class. I still remember there was no Gautier at that time, and we took the 10 hours train to Beijing, stayed in a shitty hotel because there was a lack of money at that moment.
There's a lot of cinematic experiences I've had in China that are out of this world. After a few years in China, you almost forget how crazy it is to be in such a foreign context. Just to begin, for example, having been in China for the beginning of COVID, when for all we knew, this could have been like the Black Plague, or it could have been only a scare. So I remember walking down the major streets in Shanghai, in Nanjing East Road, and having it be completely deserted. That was a pretty surreal experience. But I think on a professional level, Shanghai's offered a lot of opportunities, whereas, let's say, back in New York, I could have never seen myself in that place. I had a really interesting experience once where I started working for this public art company, and foreigners usually get to pitch or get pulled in to present on projects that are important to the firm. And we had a particularly difficult client. It's not a project that I had been staffed on, but the company had been trying to close this deal for about 7 years. And I remember the managing director just called me in one day. He's like, you have 12 hours. We're going to go to Lujiasui. We're going to go to this government meeting and we're going to close this deal. It's with a major hotels chain that shall remain unnamed, but are very difficult to deal with. And he throws me the brief. It's 7 years work. It's probably 3,000 pages. And he's like, all right, you have to pitch this tomorrow. And I think I'd been working there for a month at that time. I suited up. We showed up. It was on the top floor of this skyscraper in Lujiasui, and we're pitching to the chairman of this company probably $15 million worth of art acquisitions for a variety of hotels. And as opposed to another country where this would have to go through several rounds of decision making, this 7-year project was closed by the end of the meeting. It was just an incredibly powerful experience because it was a testament to how quickly things could get resolved in China if the right people were in the room. But it was a lot of pressure and it was very stressful.
Yeah.
I have one funny story. This was very shortly after I moved to China. I was on a work trip in Thailand. I was trying to go to this temple and there was a pack of dogs. So I ended up getting bit by them and I had to get the rabies shot 3 times.
Yeah.
I came back to Shanghai and it was time to get my second shot. But this time I had only been in China for maybe a year or less and I didn't have any Chinese. And this was, back before Didi, back before I knew how to work Baidu Maps and all of this. I was pretty lost. I just went to this hospital that I knew and showed them the prescription. And they're like, oh no, we don't have this here. You have to get the same brand name. So they pointed me to another hospital. It was raining. I had to try to find a cab and I didn't know where I was going. And finally get to this other hospital and they're like, we don't have this here either. Had to go all the way out to this one in Pudong. But it was a very intense environment. It was very chaotic and crowded. And I was trying to find the right doctor. And the doctor didn't speak English, so I was trying to explain what I needed. And she said, there's 2 different types. And for some reason, one was very expensive to me at the time, 1,000 RMB or something. And then the other one was only like 100 kwai. So obviously I want the one that's 100 kwai, but I didn't know what the difference was. And to this day, I still don't really know.
Every foreigner has some sort of funny story around translation gone wrong. I remember I was trying to ask a waiter something at a restaurant when I first moved to China, and I was doing voice translation. I asked him a question, oh, what is this on the menu? And I think the translator just said, I think I'm going to die. You look quite worried. Yeah, no, it's tricky with medical issues here in China. As a foreigner, you really have to surrender yourself to the uncertainties that you might get if you're not in the right place.
So all of you have been here for a few years now. Andrei for 15 years, Amanda for 8, and Camilo for 4 years.
I'm sure you are very familiar with Chinese environment now, but can you recall the biggest challenge when you first came here?
At that time, 2014, when Jack Ma said, we have a lot of white collars in China, come on, come to China. But he said only the first part of the story. The second part of the story, he said that percent of you will lose your money here, but still come. So I joined the project where my e-commerce background started from. So basically, I was controlling the Taobao partner and tried to understand how it works. From scratch, we bankrupted. Because we underestimated the difference and challenges of a Chinese market. I don't know about the other countries, but in Russia, a lot of people think, look at the amount of the people, 1,300,000,000. If everyone just give you 1 RMB, you're gonna be
a
rich.
billionaire, right? Yeah, I actually have that dream too,
All the world thinks about this dream when he can come up with a kind of product and everybody willing to pay. But
Right.
still, I haven't found this project.
So for me, there were 2 major barriers at the time. Back in 2014, there weren't many resources to help Laowai here in Shanghai. And I think most of the pertinent information that you get, they were all through group chats, and it takes a while to build that up. And it's really hard when you first arrive and you have no clue. Now it's a lot easier. There's translation apps. Didi is so easy to use. There's lots of different ways to get around and to connect yourself with people. There's more information online, but Back in 2014, it was really just who you knew and being in the right place at the right time. I got lost all the time. It was just hard to figure out. Like, I would say another aspect that was also difficult was language. I think for anyone who comes to China, the first thing you should do is sign up for Chinese lessons. It just makes your quality of life, your connections with others so much deeper and more meaningful. For me, I never planned on being in Shanghai for as long as I am. So my first year, I didn't make that investment, and that proved to be a major barrier.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Language is key. Like I was telling you earlier, when I moved to China, that hadn't been in the cards for me for a long time. When I got here, and in some of those first projects, I had to hit the ground running. So I remember some of my first vocab in Chinese is in the factory managing projects. So I learned how to have a conversation about welding before I could order at a restaurant. But you have to learn how to think on your feet when you're a foreigner in China. You just have to make it work and figure it out.
From my personal experience, you need to at least speak this language. Otherwise, you cannot understand the context, the way how people making decisions.
So what's the first Chinese word, apart from hello and thank you, what's the first word that you think, wow, that's so useful?
The first word, the most useful,
没有
or 明白. Or I think the first word I learned in the factory was han, which is for welding.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so after several years, when you start to pick up some Chinese and make some Chinese friends, do you think things are better or things are actually more complicated because you are starting to know the other side of China?
Yeah, there's definitely two sides to the situation. When you first arrive, there's these kind of daily obstacles and daily frustrations. But you're right, once you have been here for a while, how to make your way in a career and also navigate building your own life here, you have more insight into what are some of the expectations and what are some of the things that you're actually able to achieve as a foreigner and what are some barriers that will always be there for you.
You need to understand the way people look at you. They think you are a foreigner, you come here for a short period of time and you will go back. It changes how people behave with you. But when you say, I'll stay here for a while, I do understand this. It's all about details. You cannot convince a person one sentence that you should believe me. You should make a strategy. What do you want? How do you want to build up? What kind of things you need to do? It takes time. But people will in some way respect you because you're not just here for a while and you will go back and that's it. So think it in a strategic way.
That's right. So Andrei, after 15 years, do you think you really blend into this Chinese working environment or do you think that you're more foreigner here?
There is no pure yes or no. It's about compared to whom. If compare me to the person who just came from the USA or from Europe, of course, I'm more localized than them, but I cannot say I'm pure Chinese. Even if you're talking about the local market, there's still some distance between who are from the same province and who came from the other. It exists, and actually it's normal. I'm already adapted to this kind of thinking. You don't have to think it that way, oh, I should somehow 100% adapt. The answer is you cannot do it 100%. It's impossible. It's very tough for foreigners to adapt to this environment. China is very difficult. It's not the kind of rocket science that you cannot understand, but you should understand, otherwise people will eat you and you will lose a lot of money. I would like to suggest at least make more connections with local friends, at least to make some references.
Right.
Because without references, I'm 90% sure you're going to be fooled. Not because there's some cultural issue, but this is how the thing's going on. In Russia, we don't look who gives money. We just see money and it's enough. In China, people first look who you are, who's this money coming from. This is about connection. So it's long-term strategy, right? The Russian approach is short-term. Give me money and bye-bye. Here, you should understand you need to find the way you can legitimize yourself in his eyes. So that's why you need someone's reference. No matter how you need to build up your network of references, it will make your life much, much easier. So actually, you have this story. Every Chinese person needs to have at least two friends. One from police one from the hospital. And it will make your life much easier.
Much easier. Are you really Russian? You sure you are not born in China?
I do believe that I started to think more in a Chinese way. Even I'm talking with my Russian colleagues, it became more and more tougher. But no, I'm really a mixed person. So I do understand the gaps there. I do understand the way how people think there. So actually, I think the biggest challenge is do not take someone's no as the last stop. Maybe you don't understand the context behind. When people say no, maybe you didn't make something good for that person. When you're talking with authorities, you should forget it and no is no. But if we're talking about business environment or connection with other people, it's too many conditional no.
Is it because Chinese is more high context language? Like we hide many emotions?
Yeah, it is true. So that's why it's very tough for the foreigners to adopt.
So in your work, do you work with more Chinese or more foreigners?
So my most recent role here was in an international company that was mostly staffed by Chinese. There were only 2 foreigners compared with 80 or 90 Chinese staff.
Both of the companies that I've worked for in China were primarily local. For my work with education consulting, all of our clients were local clients. And in terms of management, I was one of 4 foreigners in the management, and then the rest of my colleagues were Chinese. When I moved to an international school, that dynamic changed. It was a ratio of about half in terms of international workers and employees.
So between local companies and MNCs, which one do you think is going to be a better working environment for foreigners in China?
I haven't worked for an MNC in Shanghai, so I can't speak to that experience per se, but from friends that I have heard their experience, there's a certain type of foreigner who comes here and they have their idea about what they want to do and how they're going to do it, and they're not open or receptive to the way that business works here in China or the culture or the way that company might be navigating or the goals that company has. So if you're not willing to take the time, not just to learn the language, but also to really learn and respect those cultural values, then you're going to have a tricky time. And a lot of times you might be just yelling at a wall and not much that you say will get accomplished, and people might not take you seriously. So there really is subtle way that you have to learn and navigate the system. And that's not the way that things really work in an MNC. In an MNC, things are very by the book, very procedural, but here in China, a lot of stuff happens outside of work. A lot of it's based on your relationships, or it can be something that happens over a dinner, and you don't really have those safeguards in the same way that you would in an MNC.
Mm-hmm. So for me, the nature of the opportunities available to foreigners in China is changing. There used to be a time where the borders were fluid. There was a lower barrier of entry to executive level positions. And I think a lot of foreigners benefited from that. But now, and especially since COVID, there's been a kind of a drastic decline in low-hanging fruit opportunities for foreigners. To some degree, COVID has been the great filter. As time has gone on, and as coming into and leaving the country has become more difficult and costly, the people that remain in China are those who have a high level of commitment to their professional future here, or maybe those who are married to a Chinese spouse and have long-term plans here. However, I think we're seeing that especially now, those medium-term tenure foreigners are going back to their home countries, which means that industries and institutions that really do need people with international experience are looking to fill those positions. So there is an opportunity there. Chinese companies, including MNCs, have done a tremendous job of localizing the roles that can be localized. Chinese workers are very highly qualified. A lot of them have international exposure, and they're very capable to fill those roles. But there are those highly specialized roles where you might benefit from being the French liaison to the French conglomerate outside of the country. You might benefit from being the Swiss person associated with the Chamber of Commerce that does business within that community. And not only are those opportunities more relevant than they were before, they're also better compensated.
So do you still think that China is a very attractive place to build a career?
No question about it. The opportunities in China today are incredible. There's a Chinese economy just overtook the US economy in the last few months. Chinese industry is thriving and Chinese innovation is thriving. There's no question that people that are well positioned will take advantage of those opportunities for decades to come. But the degree of commitment and the skill stack that a foreigner needs to have in order to take advantage of that is becoming much more demanding, which is okay. My suggestion would be, if you are deciding to move to China to build a career, to remain in China to build a career, you have to do everything within your power to leverage your skill set and also improve your competitive edge. You're either going to come to a place like CEIBS, build a network, and really get to know the nature of the business opportunities available here, or you're most likely going to leave very quickly. The students here at CEIBS, they're just incredibly well educated and skilled. Some of these guys have significant professional experience in the West, all over the world really, that they're now leveraging to have a leadership role in their own country. I find them to be incredibly interesting and very competitive. I think I underestimated how competitive our classmates would be. People here are really fighting for their future.
Absolutely. I think I had a bit of a preemptive view of this, just being in education here in Shanghai. So I am very well versed in understanding the competitive nature and the stakes that there are at risk for Chinese youth growing up here. I have so much compassion for how much preparation and how much investment, time, and money goes into education and the value that is placed on that. For me, it's so inspiring being here at CEIBS and seeing the product of what I've been helping students achieve for so long. I think that China has one of the most formidable workforces in terms of talent that I've ever seen. And for every position that a foreigner is trying to get, there's hundreds of Chinese talent that have multiple languages and extensive experience, leadership roles, global experience, global understanding, and a complete understanding of local culture. So yeah, it's incredibly competitive. If you're considering an opportunity here, you really have to bring your A game and start learning the language as quickly as possible.
So from the point you're standing right now and you look back, what did it teach you about the culture, especially in the working environment in China? And how do you think is the normal way of doing business here?
Personal relationships are key, and building a very strong foundation and reputation that you are someone who is trustworthy and you are someone who is very capable. It takes a long time, and it can also very easily be changed. Once you have built that perception of yourself, it's something that you need to fight for every day. Here in China, you're competing against so many people who are so well versed in understanding the dynamic at play in a Chinese company. You need to be on your toes all the time. And just really building your personal network. Things happen and opportunities arise, I would say 99% of the time, from someone that you know. It could be a chance meeting or being in the right place at the right time. You have to really put a lot of work and effort into cultivating that.
It's very important to remember that everyone
Observes you.
all the time, all your movements, all your behavior, and they're making checklist how this person behave herself or himself in this kind of environment, etc. So it's actually personal branding among our Chinese friends. Of course, it works abroad, so no matter from which country you are, but it's very critical here because definitely you
Cannot.
do anything here without social connections. This is the first point. And the second point, if you try to behave by yourself as a foreigner, you also will lose to someone who can make a bridge with locals and do it together, because there is still this cultural gap. No matter how good you are in Chinese,
I've learned to appreciate the sense of unity that my coworkers had towards each other. My experience is that Chinese people look after one another in a big way and really do think of themselves as playing for the same team. The other thing, if you're working in China for a long time, you're going to have to develop a sense of humor around the way business is carried out. You're going to find suppliers that are tricky. They're going to try to get the best of you, that are expecting hongbaos. You're going to find clients that are extremely and unreasonably demanding. And you're going to have projects that fall apart at a moment's notice. And you're going to have to deal with annoying little cultural idiosyncrasies. So I come from the field of public art, and part of my job is to sell clients on these enormous collaborations with international artists. And I can plan a project for months and months and come up with all these different concepts. But at the end of the day, when I present it to the client, if the feng shui master doesn't like it, my project will fall apart. As someone working in public space, you have to have considered feng shui from day one. And that's something that I was not prepared to do when I moved to China.
Oh gosh, there's so many experiences where, you can put so much work into a presentation, or we would have to do strategy every quarter and we would prepare this deck and spend so much time. And at the end of the day, a lot of times, because management here and owners in particular are so forward thinking, it's almost like they have you do all of this work just to make sure you're doing something, but they already have the answer in their head. They already know what the decision's going to be, what they're going to do, and what you say won't change that. But learning how to navigate that and being able to have some slight compromise and just learning that you're never really going to get exactly what you were shooting for, but you can veer the decision in a way that would be beneficial for everyone involved. That's something that it takes some time to learn how to do.
Mm-hmm. And then by the same token, you'll have incredibly rewarding successes, opportunities, achievements that you wouldn't have gotten anywhere else. Mm-hmm. So if you learn to take the good with the bad, if you, again, have a sense of humor about the little quirks of being in this country, and you're willing to just smooth things out after hours with a coworker, go get a drink, and keep showing up with a sense of optimism, you're going to go a long way here.
I do remember from my second year here in China, I was thinking, why are they making this way? Why do you doing this way? So many why. No answer why. Take it as it is. It's so noisy. You can count these noises in your life very easily when you structure the way how you're thinking in your brain. This is very simple idea, but it's very important idea. To get to this idea, you need to build up your own experience. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to say, understand cultural context, try to not make conclusions so fast, but it really takes time to understand. For me, it took several years. You start to change the way how you're thinking. Otherwise, it's very easy to blame someone. You can change yourself. You can change the way how you're thinking about outside world, but you cannot change outside world. So I want to repeat, it's very common sense, but you need to take time to really understand and to really use it in your life and your work experience, no matter where.
Okay, so it's clear to me that you all have adapted to China fairly well after all these years. You definitely already have the China depth and global breadth, which is the CEIBS slogan, right? So what brought all of you to CEIBS for an MBA, and how do you think it will benefit you?
For me, it's the diversity of everyone's perspective. I have never had a time in my life working with so many qualified professionals from so many various industries and different backgrounds, and understanding the perspective that an engineer would take to this approach or to solving this problem versus someone from marketing or from consumer goods is fascinating. And there's so many different interests to explore. You can go to a talk on the metaverse and then on the same day learn about VCs. It's this broadening of your horizons and really being able to dip a toe into these different industries and get to talk to people who've had experience and just learn what their day-to-day is like. For example, in corporate finance, the presentations that he's been having of our classmates just let us know what it's like to be an analyst at Ernst & Young. For me, I had no particular idea. I thought I had an idea of what someone at EY would be doing in that position, but the reality of their day-to-day is quite different. So it's been so eye-opening to see everyone's perspectives and to see everyone's goals. I've learned so much, and it's only been a few months, and it's just really been such a privilege to be with people who are so passionate and have so many different ideas.
So for me, doing an MBA is something I've had in the back of my mind for quite a few years, especially because my background is technical and applied. The last time I was in school, I was in art school. That's a long time ago. Yeah. And what I realized over the years is that all of the initiatives required a higher level of knowledge and strategic thinking that I hadn't yet received, that I hadn't yet acquired. It was a mentor that encouraged me to take the leap, and he was right. Within a week at CEIBS, I realized I should have done this earlier. Even it's helped me understand things that weren't even on my radar. So that's, again, I'm deriving a great deal of value from being here and deepening my network here in China. It's one of the most worthwhile things I've ever done.
So for us, for people who study CEIBS, the crucial thing, you can be a bridge between different mindsets.
Right.
Actually, one of the reasons why we stay here, why we come here, and what CEIBS can bring to you. CEIBS can bring to you a very different cultural mindset. How you can leverage it in your real life, it depends on you. As everything in your life, right? But at least you will have more chances to interact with different people with different backgrounds, and on that experience, you can build up your own way of the thinking, how to, communicate.
Great. So thank you for your kind sharing. So just to conclude, we would like our audience to have some takeaways from our podcast. So one last piece of advice to give to other foreigners who are actually working in China right now, or somebody who is planning to work in China.
Embrace the journey and don't take minor setbacks very seriously. Just move on and do the best that you can. But do be prepared that it's not going to be an easy ride, and things are getting more difficult in a way. But if you find your niche and if you find an opportunity, it will be a bigger opportunity here than it can be in many other places.
A lot of foreigners, when they come to China, they are lost by the decision-making process. How do they think, etc., etc. I do believe that Chinese is very good at strategy. So it's very good to make an ABC plan, and we also study game theory. It's not so straightforward as in Russia or Europe. And actually, the Chinese can read you very easily. Why? Because you're too straightforward. I think if you want to adapt as soon as possible, I would like to recommend read about 36 Stratagem. I think it's a must-read book if you want to understand the cultural context.
If I just one last piece of advice, it would be 好水洗天天 好水洗天天向上 It's you have to just one day at a time, continuous improvement. Make sure that you can learn to appreciate the local context and try to have some fun doing it.
Well, that was a lot of fun, but unfortunately, we're out of time. So thanks, Andrei, Amanda, and Camilo again for all the brilliant insights you just shared. It was fantastic having you all with me today on today's episode of CEIBS MBA Mapleside Chats about working experience in China.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for having us, Jason.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.
We hope you've enjoyed this glimpse into MBA life at CEIBS. If you have any questions or comments about this episode or the podcast in general, please feel free to reach out. Our email's in the podcast description. Stay tuned for our next episode.